Welcome everybody to APIs 101 with Postman, where we're going to learn some API essentials today. I'm May. I'm the student community manager for student programs in the US at Postman. I've been here for almost 3 months now, and I've been having a really good time. I'm very passionate about teaching and just student education in general, and so this has been the perfect role for me because I get to spend my days talking to students literally every day. So here's today's agenda. We're going to go through what APIs are, a little intro to APIs and Postman. We'll talk about doing requests and responses with APIs. I'll have the opportunity for you to try some things out, and then we'll have some follow-up resources at the end, as well as time for Q&A. But if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate. So what is an API? So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it allows services and programs to communicate with each other. Over the years, software has become a lot more complex and collaborative, and so developers no longer need to create every single service from scratch because there's more software and developers in this point right now than there's ever been in history. So really, APIs allow developers to access data from a service, like Google or Twitter, without having any prior knowledge of how the code base has been implemented. So if I am a social media influencer, and maybe I have my own personal website where I track all of my analytics for my different accounts, I don't have to go to each website individually. I don't have to go to Twitter, Twitch, YouTube to get all of that information. I can use each site's respective API to pull that information programmatically and put it all in one place without having to know how any of this is set up in the first place. So one way that we can look at APIs is as a restaurant. So if I am at my favorite restaurant and I'm going to make an order, I can't just go directly to the kitchen and get what I want, nor do I just go directly to the kitchen and tell the chef what I want. I have to talk to the server or the waiter, and they give that order to the chef. And as a result, they come back with either what I ordered, or they tell me, we don't have that today. Can you please order something else? So there's a couple of things that can also happen here. Let's say I'm at a restaurant and I'm ordering alcohol, for example. The waiter needs to know that I'm actually authorized to get this alcohol. So they need to see my ID. And as long as I have the right authorization, then my request can be fulfilled. Another example can also be paying beforehand. Some places you need to pay right when you order, and some you wait until you've actually gotten your food and then you pay. If I need to pay in order to get my food first, then that's another thing that this waiter, who's acting in this case as an API, is going to handle for me. So that's kind of a high-level overview of how APIs work, but we can look at this in a more technical way as well. So if I'm on Instagram and I want to post a picture, there's a couple of things that need to happen. First, my Instagram app needs to open my camera app on my phone so that I can take the picture. And then that information is sent back. So my camera app and Instagram are communicating with each other to share data. Then while I'm on Instagram, I'm editing that photo, right? I'm putting filters on it. I'm adding my text, anything else. And then when I'm ready to post this photo, first it's uploaded to a remote server, and then it's actually brought into the wider social network. So in this example, there's a lot of things communicating with each other. How many APIs do you think are being used?
I would say probably 4.
Why do you say 4?
I'd say from the Instagram to the camera would be an API, and then from Instagram to the social network. Oh, yes, so yeah. Probably about 3.
Yeah, so it's about 3. The camera itself has a hardware API in your phone. That's communicating with Instagram, like you said. And then Instagram is connecting with the remote server with its own API. So there's actually 3 APIs in play in this scenario, which is something that we do every time that we make a post with Instagram. So the fun thing about APIs is that there's an API for everything. And when I say that, I really do mean everything. We have anywhere from services that you probably already use, like Spotify, Twitter, and Discord, to more fun ones like the cat API. It's actually one of my favorites. It just shows you pictures of random cats. To even small services like YouTube to MP3, where you can convert YouTube videos to MP3 files. So the thing that's really cool about APIs is we used to have to make so much stuff from scratch. But think about the example when I was talking about being a social media influencer and trying to create my own analytics dashboard, basically. APIs have turned the software into Lego bricks, where I don't have to write a whole lot of code individually from scratch in order to get this information. I'm just building things on top of each other with different APIs to make the whole puzzle come together, to make my whole piece of software, which is actually pretty cool. So we've talked about APIs in a couple of different examples, but let's talk about it in the driest, most technical terms now. So an API, when we're talking about it in terms of technology, is a mediator between a client and a server to provide access to data and services. So a client in this case can be a website, a mobile app, your web browser, or as we're going to find out today, Postman. And the client makes requests to API endpoints on a server, which is where all the information is being held. So we're going to be using Postman as a client today. And we're going to make requests to an API to retrieve, add, update, and delete data. So before we jump into that, what's Postman? So Postman's a collaborative API development platform that really simplifies and streamlines the process for creating, using, and testing APIs because it puts all of that into one UI. So in the old days of working with APIs, you'd have to use a command line tool called curl. And if you've worked with a command line before, you know it can be a pain sometimes. If you make a mistake, Lord help you, like if you need to fix something, it can be difficult, as well as reading the output that comes from the command line. Sometimes all of that information can be really useful, but parsing through it can be really difficult at times. So Postman came in as a way to streamline that and put it in a UI. So it's easy to make your request. It's easy to read the response output. It's easy to add your authorization, any headers, things like that. And we're going to be defining all of these terms in a moment. So let's talk about requests and responses. This is our bread and butter of APIs. So requests. These are how we interact with the API. And there's 3 main ingredients to make a request. We have the method, which is basically an action telling the API what we want to get out of this interaction. We have our endpoint, which is essentially an address. And we have our path, which is where things can be heard, our requests can be heard at an address. So let's talk about methods. Methods specify what we want from the API. So when we make a request, we're specifying this is the information we want. There's a lot of different methods, but these are the 4 that you're going to see the most and the 4 that we're going to work with today. We have get, which is how we retrieve information, post, which is how we send information, put, which is how we update information, and delete, which is how we delete information. A nice thing about HTTP methods is that they're actually pretty self-explanatory by the way that they're named, which helps when you're working with a lot of different ones as well. Next up, we have endpoints and paths. So this is where our interaction with the API takes place. An endpoint is a channel of communication for the API, typically a URL. Like I said earlier, we can think of this as an address. And we have a path, which is the destination on that endpoint where your request can be executed. So if we're thinking about this in terms of addresses, the endpoint would be your address if you're sending a piece of mail. The path would be the unit number or the building number. So if I'm sending a request, I want to make sure I'm sending it to the right place. If you're sending a letter to your department at school, you want to make sure you're sending it to the right sub-department. Like if I have an employment request at my university, then I'm going to send that to HR or the team that I'm actually going to be working with. I'm not going to be sending it to the dean, for example. That's not who can listen to this kind of request. So that's basically what the path does. It makes sure that the information you're sending goes to the right place. So when we make requests, we can also specify detail. So we can build out a request with parameters. Essentially, if you get a lot of information, say in a GET request, we have a database full of users and we want to get a specific user. If I do just one GET request, I'm going to get everybody. So I'm going to want to specify detail, essentially. I'm going to want to specify what user I actually want. And we can use query parameters to do that. Next up, we have authorization. So the thing about authorization is it's a really in-depth topic, which in the future, we're planning on having an entire workshop dedicated to it, because it's a bit much to cover in a one-on-one session, but it's still important to talk about because requests do need authorization a lot of the time. The APIs we're going to be working with today don't require authorization because we just built them that way. But the most common form of authorization you'll see is an API key. And API keys are used just to identify who you are and also rate limit. You don't want to be spamming a server with too many requests. And that's one way that API developers protect themselves by creating API keys. There's also a lot more in-depth authorization as well. Say if I'm using the Twitter API and I want to make I want to make tweets from an account, I'm going to need specific authorization to show that I actually have the rights to this account so that I'm not making tweets to somebody else's account. And this further authorization is done in the details through things like OAuth, for example. Then we have headers and body. So headers are how we send metadata. One thing about headers that's important to note is that a lot of the authorization I mentioned, like OAuth, has lots of aspects to it. You have client secrets, client IDs, access token, secret tokens. So this is stuff that you can't just have out in the open. So you send it in the header of your request, so it's protected as metadata. The body is how we send information. So if we're going to make a post request or update something, we're going to be sending that information through the body of our request. So the thing about using APIs is that we're not just shouting to the void, because in this case, the void is shouting back to us. We're getting a response from the void. So responses have 3 key elements. Number 1 is status codes. If there is nothing else that you get from a response, you will get a status code. This tells you what happened, basically. It can be 200 OK. It can tell you 201 created if you need a post request, for example. It can say a 404 not found if you're looking for something that doesn't actually exist. You've probably come across these status codes in different places as well, particularly 404 not found or 403 forbidden. If you don't get anything else in a request, in a response like headers or body data, you will have a status code. Headers are the same as in request. They're just holding metadata. So it's just metadata from the response. And then finally, we have body data. So it's usually JSON, sometimes HTML, but this is the data that you get back from your request. And this is data that you can work with. But there are also times when we don't get back body data, but the request still went through properly, and we know this because of the status code. So we're gonna make some requests now. And I'm going to, you can follow along with this link, but I can also put it in the chat. Boop, boop, boop. Chat time. So from this page, you should see something called Basics of API. we're going to be working out of Postman now. So if you don't have a Postman account, you can take a little bit of time to create one. You can just sign up with Google if that's easiest. And I'm going to point out a couple of things here. So we are in a public workspace, and we're going to create a fork of basics of API, which is the collection we're going to be working out of. What's a collection, you may be wondering? Well, it's like it sounds like. It's a collection of things. In this case, it's a collection of requests. So we're going to be adding on to this collection as we're working. Very similar to GitHub, if you're familiar with that. Our workspaces that are public work a lot like GitHub repos. So we can fork collections the same way that we can fork. I'm sorry, somebody just sneezed very loudly in my house. I could hear it even though the door was closed. We can fork the collection. And in this case, we're going to give it a label. So I'm just going to say RamDev for my label. We're going to give a place where we want it to be forked. So I have access to this workspace, Getting Hands Dirty with APIs, because I'm one of the collaborators on it, but you won't. So you will probably want to put it under my workspace, unless you have a different workspace already created or open that you'd like to use. I actually do, so I'm going to use APIs 101 Workshop, and then I'm going to click Fork Collection. So this will allow me to fork the collection so that I can work out of it. And so I want to point out some things that we can see here. It should take you to a new screen for one, because it'll take you to your workspace. And on this right-hand side, we see that there's documentation. We also see there's some other things. We can look at collection details, forks, pull request, and comments. But I'd like to focus on the documentation because this has the link to the endpoint that we're going to be using today. So you can go ahead and open that if you want to check it out real quick. This is a joke API. It takes a little bit to load. This is where we're going to be making our API request. But first, I want to go into the first request that's here in this collection. So you can go ahead and click on Basics of API, and it should show you a drop-down, and there is a collection right here, a request in here. Before we get into this, there's actually something else that I want to show. So I'm going to add a new request real quick, because I think there's a lot of value in going a little bit deeper with some familiar examples before we dig right in. So I'm going to show a GET request for a site that we all know, google.com. I'm going to click send. So let's see what happened. I can see my status up here. It tells me 200 okay, so everything went well. And I can see I actually get a response. In this case, because I'm getting an actual web page, I get HTML back. And because it's HTML, I can even preview it under the preview tab. So when I click preview, it shows me a rendered version of the Google site. So that's pretty cool. What if I want to do an actual search on this? Well, I can. So I'm going to, under this tab, params, add a query parameter. I'll say Q, and notice as I type, it starts adding this directly into the URL. Let's search Postman. So I'm going to click send. And now notice, this didn't show me the search results themselves. It showed me Postman in the search bar. Why do you think that might be?
I would imagine it has something to do with the URL for google.com with the question mark Q being the autofill for the Google search instead of the actual search itself.
Close. So we're not looking at the actual search itself. We do need this query parameter, but the thing is, Google.com is just the endpoint. Search is the path that we can actually make a search request on. So if I click send now, I can actually get the Postman results from the search. So this is just a little quick example of how we use APIs in everyday life, because the reality is when we use our browser to go to a website, we're making a GET request. Every time that we use a website, or if you've ever built a web service, you've actually made an API. So I think that's always just a really cool thing to bring up. Okay, let's get on with the rest of it. So let me go back to this collection overview, because this documentation is really important. So when working with an API, documentation is always going to be the way that you learn how to work with the API. In this case, this is our endpoint URL. So this is what we're going to make requests to. Joke is our path to actually do stuff. So this URL on its own is just the homepage. It tells us that this is our demo for making an API server. Joke is the path where we get to do stuff. So I'm going to copy and paste, add the URL, and just do get. So you'll notice that because I did get, I get the home page because I'm just on the home page. So if I put, is it joke or jokes? It's joke. If I put joke, click send, I get a joke. If I remember correctly, the way that this is built is that you won't see all of the jokes at once. You'll get a random joke. Yeah, random jokes. So I keep getting a different one every time. Right now there's just 3. So this, oh, and if the documentation goes away on your end, you can just click on this little tab over here and it will pop back up. So I've gotten a joke now. Now it's time to add a joke. So I can do a post request in this case. So I'm going to click on these 3 dots. I'm going to click add request. I'll say send joke. Now notice on this side, it says that I'm getting. So I'm going to click on this drop down and I'm going to click on post. So I've changed the method now. Please do save. Because if you don't save, it won't update. And let me use the same URL, the same endpoint, or the same path. And I'm going to click send. So I get an error in this case, status 400, bad request. And the message I get back, missing required parameter in the JSON body or the post body or the query string. So in this case, I didn't actually send any data. I just made the request. So if I go back to the documentation, it tells me actually what the body for a post input should be. So if you're familiar with JSON format, you'll know it's like a key value pair system. So there's some required information that we need to put. We need to put the ID. We need to put who the author is. We need to put the joke. And finally, we need to put the source. And you can just put yourself as the source because you're the source of your joke. So if you want an easier way to start, you can go ahead and copy and paste this. And now I do want to point out something that I kind of glossed over. This upper half right here is all of the request information. This lower half down here is all of the response information. So you'll notice we have a body for a response, but we also have in this request pane an area for our request body. So I'm going to click on the body tab and I'm going to click on raw. I'm going to change this from text to JSON. I'll just copy and paste. Now, if I send this, there's already something that has ID 1. So I'll just change it to any number. Let's go with 6. and I'll change it to Mei. I'm the author. So you can go ahead and put whatever joke you want. The fun thing about this API is we'll also be able to see each other's jokes. So I'm going to come up with something on the spot and see. Don't touch that. Everything breaks if you do, and I'm honestly not sure why. I feel like I used to work in the game industry, and I feel like there were a lot of bugs like in the games that we made and just all over the industry where you're like, why is this apple here? And the developers are like, well, the apple is there because somebody put it there when developing to test something, but now if we remove it, it breaks things, and we don't really know why. So the apple stays. I've always thought that's a fun aspect about the game industry and just software development in general. And then I'll put myself as the source, and let's click send. So I get 201 created. Hooray! Now, we can look at this in a couple of ways. So I can go to the actual website itself and go /joke/6. And I can see my joke is on the website. I can also check in here and do /6, and it will bring up my joke. So if you have added a joke, please tell me what the ID is, because I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I had a joke, ID 4.
ID 4.
Oh no.
Oh no. Did you send your request?
I did. It said it was created, and then I sent it again and it said joke with ID 4 already exists.
Oh, there we go. Just took a moment. Nice. Awesome. So we've sent a joke. Congratulations. Now I'm going to update my own joke. So I'm going to add another request. Call it update joke. I'm going to select put out of the listing. And we're using the same URL and path at the same time. So let's look at the documentation again to see. I guess I don't have to open that. I can just open this to the side. Nope, that's just for the request. Here we go. So note that in the body, it says the body for post input is like this. So in this case, when making a put request, you're just going to do essentially add the exact same stuff. When doing a put request, you do have to add every aspect of the item that you're updating. So I'm going to do JSON, I'll do put. But now that I have everything, I can also just update the aspect that I want. So maybe I want to use Meilani. That's the long form of my name. So I'll just say Meilani. And I will send. Error, ID is not present in database. Whoop. I exist. I know I exist. 404 not found. This is a great time to debug. What do I get in the console? There's a little console at the bottom. Remember in the presentation I mentioned curl would be useful for a couple of different reasons. Because you would get additional information? Well, we can get that information not in the command line, but in a console in Postman as well. So let's see. ID is not present in database. For some reason, it cannot find my ID. Oh, it just took a little moment. Okay. Sometimes the demo API can be a little bit slow. So if I go to 6, it's going to be a little bit slow right now. Let's see. Let's get joke 6 here. There we go. It's updated here. Let's see if it's updated on the site. There we go. Meilani. Wonderful. All right. So I have gotten jokes, specific jokes. I've sent information, and I've also updated information. Let me save this. It said updates on that side. So I'm actually going to delete my joke now. So I'm going to add another request. Joke. And I'm going to put delete. So same as everything else. We use the same endpoint and path. Let me save this. And I will go to the documentation once again to see how we do delete request. So include ID in the URL, like joke 10, 10 being where the ID for the joke is. Similar to how when we look for a specific joke, we go under that path and then the ID of that joke. So time to delete my joke. Joke 6, send. Joke with the ID 6 is deleted. And I get 200 OK. Something that I want to point out, because in some APIs, when we delete, we don't actually get a response back. In the case of updating, we didn't get a response back, but we got 204, which let us, we didn't get a response body back. We got a response back that said 204. That was the status of it. So it was successful, but there was no content. And in this case, it's successful. And we have something in the body to let us know what happened. So if I go back to joke 6, whoop, the joke has not been found. That's what I want. So these are the basics of APIs. This is how we send information, get information, update, and delete information. So if I go back to the presentation now, let's just kind of recap everything that we've done and talked about. We talked about methods, addresses, so known as endpoints. We used parameters today, talked a little bit about authorization, and we talked about and used body data both in our request and from our responses. So if you would like to continue furthering your learning, we have a fun challenge for you. You can create your own public workspace with a collection using any API of your choice on postman.com, and then send it to us with this link down here. I'll put that in the chat in a moment, and we'll send cool swag to the coolest project. And if you need any help coming up with the API to use, we have a list of APIs for you to try out. And I'll be sending out these slides so you can directly click on the links. These are some really cool ones that I like, but if there's something else that you want to see, if they have an API, feel free to use it. So if you want to continue your learning even more, you can become a student expert. So Postman student experts go through a free training. It's completely self-paced. It takes anywhere between a day and a week to complete, just based off of what your time and capacity is for the moment. We get that you're students. We know that you're busy. In this training, you'll learn about sending more sophisticated requests in Postman. You'll learn how to edit documentation for a collection, like that documentation we were using. You'll write some basic test scripts, and you'll learn how to run collections, passing data between request and scripting request execution order. That sounds like a lot of words right now, but imagine if I want to get if we're going back to that example I gave earlier, where we're using a self-made website to get all of the analytics data from all of my social media, I could actually do all of that in Postman and not have to write code because I can run all of these collections in Postman and get all of that information and put it in one place as well. So these are some of the things you'll learn as student experts. People who become certified student experts get a little badge, like this badge that's on the side. It is an open badge, so you can put it on Twitter and LinkedIn. If you put it on LinkedIn, you can put it as a certification under your education. The cool thing about that is we've actually had a couple of student experts who got job interviews on LinkedIn because they had their student expert badge listed in their education. So that's something to keep in mind. If you become a student expert, you also have the option to become a student leader in your community. And what that means is we will help train you on how to train other people and grow your community. And you'll be able to do workshops kind of like this one. So I can put this link in the chat if you're interested in it. So like I said, I'll be sending out these slides as well. Here are some additional resources. We have our Learning Center. This has all of our documentation and tutorials. We have our API network where you can explore other things that people have made. And we have our community forum where you can ask any questions about APIs or Postman that you have. So I have a little bit of time to take Q&A. Are there any questions?
Last semester, my database class went and made a database, and we made API requests basically through MySQL. We just did that manually. Is there, I guess there is, how would you connect something like that with Postman? How would you go about making those two work together?
Connecting a backend to Postman?
Right, right.
So there are different ways to do this. The way that I most commonly see this is when you have an actual server up, like a local host server. So you can connect your local host server to Postman. That's actually, we have these things called mock servers too. And mock servers will give you like a little local host so that you can make a request on it. But if you're like using a local host and you have your local server running, you can do requests to that with Postman.
We were, I think we were hosting it on a Amazon EC2 instance at the end, so that would have been a lot, very helpful.
Yeah, and if you like have it on an EC2 instance, you can also use the link from that for Postman as well. I was in a REST APIs class when I almost said when I was a kid, when I was in college. And that was one of the things that we did as well, was using Amazon, connecting that with Postman. There's a lot that you can do with Postman. Do you have any other questions?
That's everything from me.
Awesome. Okay, so I have one last thing for you. Please tell us how the workshop went. Ooh. I wish that I didn't have to exit out of the presentation to send links. So please tell us how the workshop went. This is a little feedback form. This is also where you can send your collection from, or your public workspace link from our little challenge if you would like some swag. And if you have any questions we didn't cover, you can email me at milani.eyre@postman.com.